Have you ever felt like something about your life just didn't add up? Like you've always been told one story, but deep down, you always knew there was something more, something hidden in plain sight? Imagine growing up believing one thing about your identity, something that shapes who you are, the very core of your existence, only to discover, years later, that everything you thought you knew was completely wrong. What if one moment, one single photo, shattered everything you believed about yourself and changed the course of your entire life? Meet Emma. For as long as she could remember, she lived with the belief that she had been adopted. It was a fact she accepted as part of her reality. No matter how much love she received from her family, no matter how tight-knit their bond seemed, there was always that lingering feeling that she was different. That sense of not belonging, no matter how many times her parents told her she was special, that they chose her. But what happens when the truth finally comes to light? And not through a dramatic family secret revealed in a tear-filled confession, but through something as simple as a photograph? This is Emma's journey, one that began with the idea of being adopted, but ended with a revelation far more shocking than she could have ever imagined. Now, as you watch this video, I want you to imagine the emotional roller coaster Emma must have gone through. Picture her in her quiet moments, looking through old family albums, searching for clues about her true origins. She had always asked questions, always wondered about her real parents, about where she came from. But every time she brought it up, her adoptive parents would reassure her with love and patience. Still, there was always something missing. That one piece of the puzzle that seemed to elude her grasp, like a secret locked away, waiting for the right moment to surface. And that moment, for Emma, came when she least expected it. You might be thinking, what kind of photo could possibly reveal a hidden truth like that? Well, that's the part that's going to keep you hooked. You're going to want to stay with me, stay with Emma, and discover how this seemingly innocent photograph flipped her world upside down. Because what you're about to hear is not just a story about a woman discovering her roots. It's about a journey into identity, family, and the unthinkable twists of fate that life throws our way. The moment Emma discovered this truth, she was faced with a choice: to continue living in the world she thought she knew, or to step into a new reality that threatened everything she believed about herself. As you listen to Emma's story, think about your own life. How much of who you are has been shaped by what you've been told? How much of your own story is based on the things you believe versus the things that are actually true? It's a question that makes us all uncomfortable, right? We all want to believe we know who we are, but what if the answers are out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to find them? Could we handle the truth, or would it change us forever? Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. What would you do if you discovered that the life you thought you knew, the identity you held so dearly, was all based on a lie? How would that make you feel? Shocked? Betrayed? Or would you feel an overwhelming sense of relief, as if a weight you didn't even know you were carrying was suddenly lifted? These are the emotions that Emma grappled with, emotions you'll experience right alongside her as you hear the twists and turns of her journey. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take a step back and set the scene for you. Emma grew up in a loving home, raised by parents who doted on her and made sure she had everything she needed. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and milestones just like any other family. But something was always off. Maybe it was the way her mother would hesitate when asked about her biological family. Or perhaps it was the odd sense of unfamiliarity she felt when visiting relatives. They were kind, but they never quite seemed like her people. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was different. It wasn't just about skin color or looks. It was something deeper, a sense of disconnectedness that nagged at her soul. And so, as she grew older, she began to ask questions. Subtle ones at first. She would inquire about her birth, about her parents, about the family she never knew. Every time, she was met with a gentle, loving answer. You are our daughter. You were chosen. You belong here. But in her heart, Emma knew something was missing. She knew there was more to the story, a chapter of her life she wasn't allowed to read, a chapter that only a single photograph would later reveal. You're probably wondering, what was so special about this photo? What made it so powerful? Well, that's the twist that will leave you speechless. That photo wasn't just any ordinary family snapshot. It was the key to unlocking Emma's true identity, a piece of the puzzle that had been right in front of her all along. But how did it happen? How did this one image, hidden away in a forgotten corner of a dusty album, manage to reveal the deepest, most shocking truth of Emma's life? I know you're on the edge of your seat right now, and trust me, you'll want to hear every detail. But before we dive deeper into Emma's story, I need you to think about the connection we all have to our origins. What happens when the foundation of our lives is suddenly called into question? When a photo, a memory, or a detail we overlooked forces us to confront the truth about who we are. It's not just about family secrets, it's about self-discovery. It's about finding the strength to face the unknown, to challenge everything you've believed, and to embrace whatever truth may come your way. Stay with me, because what's coming next will change how you view identity, family, and the incredible power of a single photograph. Emma's journey is one that will resonate with anyone who's ever questioned where they come from, who they belong to, or what it means to truly know yourself. It's a story of revelation, of identity, and of coming to terms with the past, even when the truth is more shocking than you could ever imagine. And now, as the photo reveals itself to Emma, the tension builds. She stares at the image, unsure whether to believe her eyes, unsure if the truth she's seeing is even possible. But she knows, deep down, that this moment will define her future. What happens next? The answer is more surprising than you could ever expect. Keep watching, because we're just getting started. As Emma stared at the photograph, her heart raced, and her mind spun in a million directions. The image in front of her was something she had never seen before, yet there was a strange sense of familiarity about it. It wasn't a snapshot from her childhood or one of the many family photos she had grown up with. No, this was different. This was something taken years before she was born, and the woman in that photograph, the woman who shared her smile, her eyes, the very essence of who she was, wasn't just a distant stranger. No, this was someone she should have known, someone who had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface of her life. She felt a chill crawl up her spine as the pieces of the puzzle began to shift in her mind, but there was no way to fit them together just yet. But before Emma could make any sense of the photograph, she had to understand the journey that led her to this moment. It wasn't like she had been idly waiting for the truth to appear. Far from it. Emma's life had been full of questions, struggles, and an undeniable sense that something was off. For years, she had searched for answers, though not always in the most obvious ways. She'd spent countless hours trying to dig through old family records, sifting through papers, letters, and even distant memories. But nothing ever added up. It was as though her past had been carefully concealed, sealed away in some dark corner of her life, hidden from view. It wasn't just curiosity that pushed Emma forward. It was a deep, emotional need for closure, for understanding who she was, where she truly belonged, and why the strange sense of detachment had never fully gone away. She had always felt like the odd one out, the outsider in her own life. A few months prior to finding that photograph, Emma's life had taken an unexpected turn. She had been in a committed relationship with David, someone she had been dating for over a year. He was warm, kind, and supportive, always encouraging her to find peace with her past. But Emma's struggle with her identity kept causing friction between them. It was as though she couldn't quite move forward with her life until she had all the answers. David, for all his love and care, simply didn't understand the magnitude of her questions. He had never questioned his own roots or history in such a profound way. But for Emma, every day was a reminder that something crucial had been withheld from her. The more time passed, the more the cracks in their relationship began to show. She felt guilty for pulling away, but she couldn't help it. She was drowning in uncertainty, and David couldn't save her from it. In addition to the strains in her romantic life, Emma had also become increasingly disconnected from her adoptive family. Her parents had always been loving, but their attempts to reassure her that she belonged, that she was theirs, no longer seemed to ease her restless heart. She had asked them, more times than she could count, about her origins, about her biological family. Each time, they had responded with the same words: "You were chosen, Emma. You are ours." But despite their loving words, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling her the full truth. The cracks in their seemingly perfect life were beginning to widen, and Emma couldn't help but feel that her search for answers was somehow pulling them apart. There were moments when she thought her parents knew something they were keeping from her, but they never gave her the chance to ask directly. Every time she tried, there was an unsettling silence that followed, a silence that spoke louder than any words could. And so, Emma had found herself standing at the threshold of a decision that could either uncover the truth she had longed for or drive her further away from the people she loved. She began to reach out to distant relatives, hoping they might hold the key to unlocking the mystery of her birth. But each conversation seemed to only deepen the mystery. Some family members were warm and open, while others were strangely evasive, almost as though they were hiding something. It was in these moments, when Emma felt the weight of her family's secrecy pressing down on her, that she began to truly question whether she was even meant to find the answers she was seeking. But it wasn't until the photograph appeared, tucked away in a forgotten box, one she had almost thrown away during a spring cleaning session, that the door to the truth was finally opened. Emma hadn't expected it, hadn't even known to look for it. The photo was buried beneath a pile of old letters, faded receipts, and family mementos. At first, she thought it was just another forgotten memory. But as she pulled it out and stared at the image, she realized it wasn't just any ordinary photo. There, staring back at her, was a woman she had never seen before, a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Emma herself. The woman's face was framed by the same curly hair, the same sharp features. It was as though she were looking at a version of herself from a different time, a version she had never known. The more Emma stared at the photo, the more she was drawn into its mystery. The woman in the picture wasn't just a stranger. She was family. And Emma knew, deep down, that this woman was the missing link, the connection to her past that she had been searching for. But why had she never seen this photo before? Why hadn't anyone ever mentioned her? As Emma ran her fingers over the photograph, a wave of confusion and disbelief washed over her. How could something this significant have been hidden for so long? And who was this woman? The key to everything she had been searching for. As the questions piled up in her mind, Emma felt a strange sense of unease. Was it possible that this woman in the photograph was her biological mother? Or was there another connection? One that went deeper than blood? The more she thought about it, the more the questions seemed to spiral out of control. Was this a simple family secret that had been kept for reasons Emma couldn't understand? Or was there something far more sinister at play, something that had been intentionally buried for years? But as she looked at the faces of her adoptive parents, her mind was consumed with doubt. Could they have been lying to her all along? Was this photo proof of something they had been trying to hide from her? And if so, why? Was there more to her story than just a typical adoption narrative, something darker lurking beneath the surface? Emma knew she needed answers, but the deeper she dug, the more elusive the truth became. The people she trusted, the family she thought she knew, were all suddenly suspect. And every new piece of information seemed to only raise more questions. But Emma was determined. This photo was the key, she knew it. And she wouldn't rest until she understood its significance. But as she began to connect the dots, one thing became clear. The truth, when it finally came, was going to change everything. What Emma didn't yet realize was that the answers she was about to uncover would not only reveal her real identity, but would also open a Pandora's box of secrets that no one, not even Emma, was prepared for. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how deep the web of deception truly went. But one question lingered. Who, exactly, was trying to keep her from the truth? Was it her adoptive parents? A distant relative? Or someone else entirely? Someone who had been watching her every move, waiting for the right moment to strike? Keep watching, because the twists are only just beginning. As Emma's obsession with the photograph deepened, so did her resolve to uncover the truth. Every day, she found herself pulled further into the mystery, searching through old boxes, family heirlooms, and forgotten documents, all in an attempt to piece together the fragments of her past. But no matter how much she unearthed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was trying to keep her from discovering the full story. It was as if someone, or something, was deliberately trying to block her from the answers she so desperately sought. The more she dug, the more she realized just how tangled the web of deception was. One evening, after a long day of sifting through old files, Emma came across a peculiar envelope hidden inside an old journal. The envelope was thick, yellowed with age, and sealed with a wax stamp she didn't recognize. Her heart raced as she carefully opened it, hoping to find something, anything, that might give her the missing link she needed. Inside, she found a letter that was clearly written decades ago, its edges frayed and its ink faded. The letter was addressed to her adoptive mother, but what struck Emma the most wasn't the content of the letter itself. It was the date. The letter was dated just a few weeks before she was born. It was as if someone had known something was going to happen long before it did. The letter contained vague references to arrangements being made and the future of the child. It spoke of a decision that would change everything, but never fully explained what that decision was. The handwriting was familiar, but not in a way that Emma could immediately place. There was something off about it, something that felt rehearsed. But before Emma could examine it further, she noticed something chilling. The letter had been cut in half. Someone had intentionally removed the second page, leaving her with only a fragment of the truth. The rest of the letter was gone, vanished without a trace. Frustration began to mount as she realized that the closer she got to the truth, the more obstacles appeared in her path. It was as if there were people out there who didn't want her to uncover what had been hidden all these years. But Emma couldn't stop. She refused to let the secret slip away again, not after everything she had uncovered so far. And then, just when she thought she was making progress, things took a darker turn. Emma received an anonymous message on her phone one night, just as she was preparing to head to bed. The message was brief, only a few words, but the warning was clear. Stop digging. You're going to regret it. No number, no name, just the cryptic message that sent a chill down her spine. For a moment, Emma hesitated. Was it a prank? A hoax? Or was someone genuinely trying to scare her off? Her fingers trembled as she stared at the screen, but the thought of backing down never crossed her mind. Whoever had sent the message didn't understand her. She wasn't going to be intimidated. The very next day, Emma decided to confront her adoptive parents. She had never questioned them directly before, but she could feel the truth pressing against her chest, demanding to be set free. Her heart pounded as she sat across from them at the kitchen table, the photograph and the letter now in her hands. She could feel the weight of the moment, the quiet tension that filled the room. Her adoptive mother's eyes softened as Emma placed the letter in front of her. "Mom, what is this? Why was this letter hidden from me?" Emma asked, her voice shaking but determined. Her mother stared at the envelope for a long moment before looking up, her face pale. She didn't speak immediately, as if searching for the right words to say. "You're asking questions that I don't think you're ready to hear, Emma," her mother said quietly, her voice almost breaking. "Some things are better left untouched." The words hung in the air like a warning, but Emma wasn't about to back down. "What are you talking about? Who is the woman in this photograph?" she pressed, her voice firm. Her mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her eyes darting to her husband, who had remained eerily silent throughout the conversation. For the first time, Emma noticed something in their eyes, a look she couldn't quite place. "Fear? Guilt? I don't want you to go down this road, Emma," her mother whispered, her voice tight. "Please just trust me. You don't want to know what's on the other side of this. It's not what you think." Before Emma could respond, the front door swung open, and her father walked in, his expression clouded. There was something about his demeanor that sent a cold shiver down Emma's spine. He didn't speak at first, but the tension in the room was palpable. Emma could see it in their eyes, the panic, the urgency, as if something had just shifted, something they weren't prepared for. "I think it's time we had a talk," her father said, his voice grim. "But not here. Not now." Emma was left speechless. What had she stumbled upon? Why were they so desperate to keep her from finding the truth? The more she thought about it, The more she realized that there was something deeper at play here, something much more complex and dangerous than she could have imagined. And just as she opened her mouth to press further, her phone buzzed once again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a missed call. The caller ID was blocked. Her heart skipped a beat. Emma felt a rising sense of dread, but she couldn't stop herself from calling the number back. After a few rings, the line clicked, and a voice, one she didn't recognize, spoke, its tone cold and calculating. "You need to stop looking, Emma. You're getting too close." Before she could respond, the line went dead. The blood drained from Emma's face as she stared at her phone in disbelief. Who had just called her? And what did they mean by too close? There was no way she was going to stop now, but the walls were closing in. Someone, somewhere, was watching her every move. The deeper Emma went, the more dangerous this all became. What was the cost of the truth? How far would she have to go to uncover it? She had no idea just how tangled this mystery was, but one thing was certain. The more she uncovered, the more dangerous the game became. She wasn't just chasing answers anymore. She was running headfirst into a storm, and there was no turning back. The photo, the letter, the warnings, all of it pointed to one undeniable fact. The truth was out there, waiting for her, but it came at a steep price. And Emma had no idea what the cost of that truth would be. Was it worth it? Or would the truth destroy everything she thought she knew? Stay tuned, because what comes next will shock you to your core. The game is only just beginning. As Emma sat there, clutching her phone, the weight of the conversation with her parents still hanging in the air, she couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that gnawed at her. Whoever was pulling the strings behind the scenes wasn't just targeting her anymore, they were targeting everyone in her life. The suddenness of the phone call, the cryptic warning, it all felt far too orchestrated. She had been naive to think that she could simply uncover the truth without facing resistance. But what she didn't expect was that her investigation would begin to spill over into the lives of those closest to her. The very next day, as if on cue, Emma's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text and it wasn't a call, it was a voicemail. Her heart sank as she played the message, a cold sweat prickling along her spine. The voice was distorted, almost mechanical, like someone had intentionally tried to disguise it. But there was no mistaking the content of the message. "Stop digging, or others will pay the price." The words hit her like a slap to the face, and for the first time, Emma felt real fear creeping into her veins. Was this a threat? A warning meant to keep her silent? Or worse, to make her stop searching for answers altogether? The message didn't make any sense, but there was no doubt about its intent. It was personal, it was real, and it wasn't going away. Emma sat frozen for a moment, the air in her room suddenly feeling too heavy, too suffocating. She tried to process the message, but it felt like the walls were closing in on her. Who were these people? Why were they so desperate to stop her? And who else could be affected by her investigation? The answer came to her with a sickening clarity. David. The man she had been with for over a year. The man who had been so patient with her, who had supported her in ways no one else had. Could he be involved? Could someone have targeted him because of her relentless pursuit of the truth? The thought was too horrifying to entertain, but Emma couldn't ignore the gut feeling gnawing at her. Her mind raced as she remembered the strange phone call he had received just a few days earlier, when he had stepped out of the house to take a call that he refused to discuss. At the time, Emma had dismissed it as just another one of his business calls, but now, with everything spiraling out of control, she wasn't so sure. Could it be connected? Could David have been hiding something from her all along? Determined to find out, Emma picked up her phone and called him, trying to keep her voice steady despite the panic swelling inside her. "David, I need to talk to you. It's important," she said, barely able to keep the edge of fear from her words. There was a long pause on the other end, and when he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant, almost strained. "Emma, now's not the best time. I'm in a meeting," he said, his words hurried, as though he were trying to brush her off. But Emma could hear something in his tone, something that didn't sit right. "I don't care about your meeting, David. Something's going on, and I need you to be honest with me." Did you get a call, a strange call, the other day? There was a long silence, and then the line clicked, as if the call had been abruptly ended. Emma's stomach dropped. What had just happened? Why would he hang up on her like that? Had she hit too close to something? Or was she just overreacting? She dialed his number again, but this time it went straight to voicemail. The knot in her chest tightened. Something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Frustrated and on edge, Emma decided to stop by David's apartment later that afternoon, hoping to confront him in person. When she arrived, there was no answer. She knocked again and again, but the apartment remained eerily silent. Her heart pounded in her chest as a feeling of dread washed over her. Where was he? Had something happened to him? It wasn't until she was about to leave that she noticed something strange. The window to his living room was slightly ajar, the curtains swaying in the breeze. Without thinking, she pushed it open and climbed inside, her mind screaming at her to turn back, but her instincts telling her that she needed to see for herself what was going on. As she stepped into the room, she noticed the unsettling signs of disarray, a table tipped over, papers scattered on the floor, and the unmistakable presence of someone having rifled through his things. Someone had been here, and recently. Her eyes fell on the desk, where a stack of papers lay. Without hesitation, she went through them, her breath catching in her throat as she came across a familiar name, a name that sent a chill down her spine. The letterhead belonged to none other than the adoption agency that had handled her case. Emma's blood ran cold as she flipped through the pages, realizing that they were not just records about her, but about David as well. It didn't make sense. Why would David have documents related to her adoption? And why had he never mentioned it? The evidence before her painted a disturbing picture, one that made her question everything she thought she knew about the man she loved. Her mind was spinning, her thoughts racing as she tried to make sense of what she had found. Could David have been involved in her adoption process without her knowledge? Was there a connection between him and the people who had been trying to stop her from uncovering the truth? The questions mounted, each one more disturbing than the last. She had always trusted David, but now everything was in doubt. Just as she was about to dig deeper, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. "You're too close, Emma. If you want to protect him, you need to stop now." The words sent a jolt of panic through her, and the room seemed to close in on her as she realized what it meant. David was in danger, and if she didn't back off, she might lose him. Or worse, he might be caught up in something far darker than she could ever have imagined. But just as she was about to leave the apartment, Emma heard a noise. A door creaked open in the hallway, followed by footsteps. Someone was coming. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly shoved the papers into her bag and hid behind the couch, holding her breath. The footsteps grew louder, and Emma's mind raced. Who was it? Was it David? Was it someone else? Whoever it was, Emma knew she had to leave before she was caught, but as she peered around the corner, she saw something that made her freeze in her tracks, a familiar face, one she never expected to see here. The last person she thought would be involved in all of this was standing right in front of her, and the twist she had just stumbled upon was only the beginning. Everything was unraveling at once, and Emma had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. But one thing was certain. The stakes were higher than ever, and the truth, when it finally came, was going to shake her to her core. The game had changed. As Emma slipped quietly out of David's apartment, her pulse hammering in her ears, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The air outside felt different, colder, as though the world had shifted around her, and everything she thought she knew was now a lie. The cryptic messages, the missing pieces of the puzzle, and now the papers she had discovered, all of it pointed to something much darker than she had ever imagined. She tried to steady herself, but the unsettling feeling that someone was following her never left. Every glance over her shoulder, every shadow that moved just a little too quickly, made her heart race faster. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was real. She could feel it deep in her bones. The first sign that something was wrong came when she took a turn down a side street near her apartment. As she walked, she noticed a black car parked a few yards away. The engine was running, but the windows were tinted so darkly that she couldn't see inside. It wasn't unusual to see cars like this in the city, but something about it felt wrong. She quickened her pace, but as she did, the car's engine revved, and it began to follow her at a slow but steady pace, keeping a distance but never letting her out of its sight. Her breath caught in her throat, her legs almost betraying her as she forced herself to move faster. She took another turn, then another, hoping to shake whoever was tailing her, but the car mirrored every move, staying just close enough to make her heart race. By the time she reached her building, the car was still there, parked across the street. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she didn't hesitate for a second before rushing inside. She slammed the door behind her, bolting it with shaking hands. She tried to steady her breath, but the weight of what had just happened settled in her chest, making it hard to breathe at all. She wasn't just digging into her past anymore. She was digging into something much bigger, something far more dangerous, and whoever was watching her now was just the tip of the iceberg. She needed answers, but she was starting to wonder if finding them was worth the price. The fear, the uncertainty, it was starting to break her down. It wasn't just the strange messages or the disappearance of key evidence anymore. It was the fact that she was being hunted, that someone was actively trying to keep her from uncovering the truth. The line between paranoia and reality was blurring, and she wasn't sure which side she was on anymore. The next morning, things took an even darker turn. When Emma went to check her phone, she saw something that made her stomach drop, an alert from a news site about a local woman who had gone missing. The name was vaguely familiar, but it took her a moment to place it. It was Rachel, a close friend from her childhood. They hadn't spoken in years, but Rachel had been one of the few people who knew bits and pieces of Emma's past. Could she be connected to all of this? Had she known something Emma didn't? Her mind raced as she clicked the article, only to find that the details were sparse. Rachel had vanished the previous night, and there were no leads, no clues. Just a hole in the world where she used to be. As Emma stared at the screen, a feeling of dread washed over her. Rachel had always been a little eccentric, a little unpredictable, but she would never just disappear without a trace. It didn't add up. It felt wrong. The message she had received, the threats, it was as if someone had been warning her not to dig any deeper, not to ask any more questions. And now Rachel was gone. Emma couldn't ignore the connection. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was tied to everything. To her investigation, to the secrets buried in her past. She needed to talk to someone to make sure she wasn't imagining things. She tried David again, but this time, his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic began to swell in her chest as she thought about how he had acted the last time they spoke, distant, evasive, like he knew something but refused to share it. Had he gotten caught up in this mess too? Was he in danger as well? She could feel the weight of it all pressing in on her, the uncertainty gnawing at her from every direction. Desperate, Emma called her best friend, Kate, who had known about her search for the truth from the beginning. Kate had always been the level-headed one, the one who would tell her if she was overreacting, if she was chasing shadows. But when Kate answered the phone, there was something off about her voice, something strained, as if she was holding something back. "Kate, have you heard about Rachel?" "The news, she's missing," Emma said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice, but failing. There was a long pause, and when Kate finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Emma, I don't know what's going on, but I think someone's been following me, too. It's been happening for days. I didn't want to tell you, but I don't know who else to talk to." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "What? Are you serious?" "Kate, who's following you?" "I don't know. I just get the feeling that someone's been watching me, listening in on my calls. Kate's voice faltered, then grew quieter. "I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to freak you out, but now I think we're both in danger. Whoever's behind this isn't going to stop until they get what they want." Emma's heart thudded in her chest, her mind spinning as she pieced it all together. Rachel's disappearance, Kate's fear, the car that had been following her, the strange messages. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all of them, caught in something much bigger than they could have ever imagined. Emma's hands were shaking as she listened to Kate's voice, her stomach churning as the weight of the situation settled in. "Kate, I think we need to stop. This is getting too dangerous," Emma said, her voice trembling with the realization of how deep she had gone into something she couldn't control. But before Kate could respond, the line went silent. The call had dropped, leaving Emma staring at her phone in disbelief. Had something happened? Was Kate okay? The sudden silence was deafening, and Emma's heart pounded as she desperately tried to call her back. No answer. The fear, the sense of helplessness, hit Emma harder than it ever had before. She was alone now, in a way she hadn't been before. The threats, the people disappearing, the danger that was closing in, it was real. And Emma was no longer just a person on a quest for answers. She was a target, a pawn in a game that was bigger than she ever imagined. Everything she had uncovered, everything she thought she understood, was beginning to unravel. The truth was still out there, but now it seemed further away than ever. And with every step she took, the world around her became darker, more dangerous. Emma didn't know who to trust anymore, or if she even had the strength to keep going. But one thing was certain. The stakes had never been higher, and the danger was closer than she could have ever realized. What would happen next? Would anyone be left to uncover the truth? Or would the darkness claim them all before they could find the answers? Just when Emma thought she couldn't spiral any further into the chaos, an unexpected phone call flipped everything she thought she knew on its head. It was early in the morning, the kind of quiet hour that made everything feel too still, too empty. She had barely slept, the weight of the last few days pressing down on her like a heavy fog, leaving her with more questions than answers. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and when she glanced at the screen, she saw a familiar name, David. She hesitated for only a moment before picking up, her hands still trembling as she pressed the phone to her ear. "David? Where have you been?" "I've been trying to reach you," Emma said, her voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. She had expected him to be distant, to offer some half-hearted explanation for his silence. But what he said next made her freeze, every word chilling her to the bone. "Emma, you need to listen carefully. This is the only chance I have to explain everything before they find me." Her heart stopped. "What do you mean? Who's going to find you? What's going on?" There was a long pause before David's voice came through again, rough and filled with urgency. "I wasn't the one who disappeared. I never went anywhere, Emma. The person you've been looking for, the one you think is missing? It's me. It was always me." Emma felt the ground beneath her shift as she tried to process what he was saying. Her mind screamed in disbelief. What was he talking about? Had she misunderstood everything? The blood drained from her face as the weight of his words settled in. David wasn't just a bystander in all of this. He was the missing person. The whole time she thought she was chasing answers about her own past, she had unknowingly been part of someone else's twisted game. "I know this sounds crazy, but I didn't want to get you involved. You were never supposed to find out, Emma. But now that you're too deep in, I have no choice. They're coming for both of us," David continued, his voice trembling. "I thought I could protect you, but you've already uncovered things you shouldn't have." Emma's pulse raced as the world around her felt like it was spinning out of control. "David, what are you talking about? Who's after us? Why didn't you tell me the truth before?" It's not that simple. You don't understand." He cut in sharply, his voice breaking. "Your past, my past, it's all connected in ways you can't even begin to imagine. You weren't just adopted, Emma. You were." He stopped, and there was a shift in his tone, a sudden hesitation. It was as if he had made a decision, but now, with the weight of the truth about to spill out, something made him hold back. "You need to leave. Right now." Before Emma could ask another question, the line went dead. For a moment, Emma stood in complete silence, the world around her becoming too heavy to bear. She had always believed that she was looking for answers about her own identity, about the mystery of her adoption and the strange coincidences that had been haunting her. But now, it seemed that the mystery wasn't about her at all. It was about David. It was about his past, his secrets, and the dangerous web they had both unknowingly stepped into. Just when she thought she couldn't sink any deeper, a sudden knock on her apartment door shattered the fragile stillness. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't been expecting anyone, especially after the bizarre message from David. She tiptoed toward the door, her breath caught in her throat as she peered through the peephole. A woman stood there, holding a large envelope in her hands. She looked familiar, but Emma couldn't place her face. Cautiously, she opened the door, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. The woman didn't introduce herself right away. Instead, she handed Emma the envelope without a word, then turned and left as quickly as she had appeared. Emma stood frozen, the envelope feeling like it weighed a ton in her hands. She could feel the tension thickening in the air, as though everything was about to come crashing down at once. Inside the envelope was a photograph, one that made Emma's stomach lurch. It was a picture of her, but not the person she was now. The woman in the photo was young, barely a toddler, standing in a room she didn't recognize. The most chilling detail, though, was the woman standing beside her, smiling down at her with a strange, almost knowing look in her eyes. It was a photo Emma had never seen before, but there was something about it that felt wrong. The woman in the picture wasn't just familiar. She looked too much like someone Emma had known all her life. And then it hit her like a punch to the gut. She recognized the face. It was the same woman who had visited her childhood home when she was a little girl, the one who had always watched her from the corner of her vision but never spoke to her. She wasn't just in the picture. She was a part of the story, her story. Emma's breath caught as a wave of realization crashed over her. The truth wasn't just buried in her past. It was a lie, carefully constructed to keep her from knowing what had really happened all those years ago.
But why?
Who was behind this elaborate web, and what did they want with her? The answers felt just out of reach, like the edge of a dream she couldn't quite grasp. And David, what did he know that he wasn't telling her? Why had he pulled away when it was clear now that he was hiding something far darker than anyone could have imagined? Just as she was about to make another call, the phone rang again, jolting her from her thoughts. But this time it wasn't David. The caller ID displayed an unknown number.
Hesitantly, she answered.
Emma. A voice on the other end said, its tone cold and familiar. It's time to stop playing this game. Your past is not what you think it is, and if you keep going, you won't just destroy yourself. You'll destroy everyone around you. It's too late to turn back now. The line clicked, and Emma was left standing in stunned silence. Every answer, every piece of the puzzle, now felt like it had been carefully orchestrated to lead her to this exact moment. She wasn't just trying to uncover the truth. She was being manipulated. And whoever was behind this had just shown her that they were always one step ahead, always watching, always waiting. What was the real purpose behind the lies? And how much further was she willing to go before the truth broke her completely? The weight of the mystery had never felt so heavy, and Emma knew, in that moment, that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Emma's mind raced as she sat frozen in her apartment, the phone calls still echoing in her head. Whoever was behind this, whatever they had planned, she was no longer a mere bystander in the story. She was the center of it, and she had just been given an ultimatum that she could not ignore. The weight of that choice crushed her chest, tightening around her heart with a suffocating pressure. She could feel the darkness closing in on her, but this was not just some distant threat.
It was personal now.
Everything had been personal from the start, but now, it felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, with nothing but the unknown waiting below. As she sat there in the silence of her apartment, trying to piece together what had just happened, she knew she had no time to waste. She couldn't keep running. The people who had been manipulating her, pulling the strings of her life, they were too close now. She had to act, and she had to act fast. Her thoughts kept circling back to David, his cryptic messages, the way he'd vanished without a trace, and the way his sudden reappearance seemed like part of the same dangerous game. Why had he disappeared in the first place? Why had he never told her the truth? Was he in on this all along? Or was he just another pawn in a much larger, darker plot? She couldn't keep wondering. She needed answers. She needed them now. It wasn't long before Emma found herself on her way to David's apartment. the streets outside her window feeling colder than they had just hours before. The city, once familiar, now felt like a maze, each turn potentially leading to something worse. Her mind replayed the phone call, those chilling words. Whoever this was on the other end, they knew things that no one else could possibly know. It felt like she was being pushed into a corner, forced to choose between what she thought was right and what she knew deep down was the only way out. But how could she know what was right anymore? The truth had become a weapon, and Emma wasn't sure if she could bear to use it. She arrived at David's apartment building, her heart hammering in her chest. She had no plan, no strategy other than the desperate need to confront him and demand answers. But as she made her way up the stairs, her mind kept drifting back to the ultimatum. The voice on the phone had been clear. If she continued down this path, if she kept digging for the truth, there would be consequences. Consequences that would affect more than just her. Emma's pulse quickened as she reached David's door and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, more urgently this time, but there was still nothing. Her fingers gripped the handle, and without thinking, she turned it. To her shock, the door swung open, revealing a scene that made her heart skip a beat. David was there, standing in the middle of the room. But he wasn't alone. There, sitting in the dim light, was someone she never expected to see again, Rachel. The same Rachel who had gone missing days earlier, the one Emma had feared was gone for good. Rachel. Emma's voice was barely a whisper, a mixture of relief and confusion flooding her chest. What are you doing here? How are you? David stepped forward, his eyes dark with something she couldn't place. We need to talk, he said, his voice low and serious. The room felt like it was closing in on her, the air thick with tension. Everything Emma thought she knew was unraveling before her eyes, and the shock of seeing Rachel alive was the final push over the edge. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't either of you say anything? Emma demanded, her voice rising with frustration, her emotions boiling over after days of confusion and fear. Why all the lies? Why keep me in the dark? Rachel stood, walking over to Emma with slow, deliberate steps. Her face was as calm as ever, but her eyes held something darker now, something Emma couldn't ignore. Because we had to, Emma, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. There are things you don't understand. Things you weren't supposed to find out. Emma recoiled, her mind swirling with disbelief. Things I wasn't supposed to find out? She repeated, her words sharp with anger. You think I wanted to be a part of this mess? You think I wanted to dig up the past and uncover all these secrets? I didn't ask for any of this, Rachel. All I wanted was the truth. David stepped forward, his face twisted with the weight of a decision he was clearly struggling to make. It's not that simple, Emma, he said, his voice low and urgent. There are people, dangerous people, who don't want you to know what you're about to learn. We've been trying to protect you. But from what? Emma demanded, her eyes scanning both of them. What's so dangerous about the truth? Why am I suddenly the one in the middle of this? Why have I been pulled into something that feels like it's much bigger than me? Who are you really, David? Who are you really, Rachel? Rachel exchanged a quick glance with David, and then, to Emma's shock, she answered, You were never supposed to find out, Emma. About us. About the reason you were adopted in the first place. The reason you were raised by strangers. She paused, taking a breath before continuing. You're not who you think you are. And neither am I. Neither is David. Emma's stomach dropped as Rachel's words hit her like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? What do you mean I'm not who I think I am? David's face twisted with something between guilt and fear. What Rachel is saying is true. Your adoption wasn't an accident. Your real parents, your biological parents, they were involved in something bigger than you could ever imagine. Something dangerous. And now, that danger's closing in. Emma felt the room spin as everything she thought she understood came crashing down. She had always felt different, always sensed there was something more, but this was impossible. Her real parents, involved in something dangerous? It didn't make sense. How could her life have been built on such a massive lie? What were they asking her to do now? To just accept it? To accept that everything she had known was a fabrication? The phone call, The threats, the disappearance of Rachel, it was all part of the same game, the same twisted narrative. But what was the point? And more importantly, what was the cost of getting to the truth? She was standing on the precipice now, forced to choose between the only life she had ever known and the unsettling reality that was unfolding before her. Rachel and David were looking at her now, their expressions filled with a mixture of warning and regret. They knew what was coming, and they knew that Emma's next move could be the one that tipped the scales forever. "Emma," David said, his voice tight with the weight of the decision they were all facing. "You have to decide. The truth isn't something you can walk away from. If you want it, you have to be ready for what comes next. You can't unlearn it. You can't undo it." Emma's heart raced as she looked from David to Rachel. The air was thick with the tension of the impossible choice laid before her. The truth.
Safety.
The future. How far was she willing to go? Was the truth worth the cost? Could she really turn her back on everything she had ever known? The clock was ticking, and with every passing second, she was sinking deeper into a world of lies, deception, and danger she never asked for, but could never escape. The decision was hers to make. But would she be able to handle the truth when it finally came crashing down? The tension in the room thickened, and Emma could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on her. The truth was within reach, but it felt like a jagged knife, one she wasn't sure she was ready to hold. She turned to David, her eyes searching his face for something, anything, that might make sense of the mess she had been thrown into. But his eyes were hollow, tired, as if he had already seen too much and knew the world he was dragging her into wasn't one she could just walk away from. Her mind raced with the impossible choices. She could keep pushing forward, risking everything for answers, or she could walk away, leave it all behind, and never know what her life was supposed to be. Neither option seemed right. Neither felt like a way out. But before she could voice the question that had been gnawing at her, Rachel's voice broke the silence, shaking with the weight of something far darker than Emma had yet realized. "There's more, Emma. This isn't just about your adoption or David's past. It's bigger. A lot bigger." Emma blinked, trying to process what Rachel was saying, but it didn't make sense. She shook her head, her breath coming out in quick, shallow gasps. "What do you mean bigger? What's so big about this that we can't?" But she couldn't finish the sentence. It felt like the walls were closing in on her. Rachel's words were spinning in her mind, and she was drowning in the gravity of what she had just learned. What's happening? Who is behind this? David looked at Rachel, and the brief exchange of glances between them told Emma that something had shifted, something had just been revealed that they hadn't prepared her for. Rachel turned back to her, her expression now more resigned than before. "We're not just talking about your life. There are people, organizations, entire networks who have been controlling everything. Not just your past, but everyone who's ever gotten close to this secret. And they won't stop until it's buried for good." Emma's stomach churned as her mind tried to make sense of the words. "Control? What do you mean? Who's controlling us?" Rachel took a step closer, her voice now more urgent. "I don't know all the details, but I know this. They've been watching us for years. From the moment you were born, they've been keeping tabs on everyone connected to you. David wasn't just part of this because of you, he was a part of something much bigger, something he's been running from." David's face was pale, his expression strained as he looked at Emma. "I didn't ask for this, Emma. I never wanted any of this. But I can't escape it anymore. No one can. They're too powerful." Before Emma could ask what he meant, the door to the apartment suddenly slammed open. The noise was deafening, and before anyone could react, men in dark suits stormed in, their faces cold and unreadable. Emma's heart stopped as she looked at David, his eyes wide with panic. "Get down," he ordered, grabbing her arm and yanking her to the floor.
"Now."
The men moved quickly, surrounding the room, and Emma had no time to think, no time to process. Her breath caught in her throat as one of the men approached Rachel, his hand grabbing her by the wrist and pulling her to her feet. "We told you to stay out of this," the man growled, his voice low and threatening. Emma watched in shock as Rachel didn't resist. Instead, she looked over at Emma, her face a mix of guilt and regret. "I tried to protect you," Rachel whispered. But it was always too late. You're too deep in now. David stepped in front of Emma, his body tense with fear as he squared off against the man holding Rachel. You don't have to do this. We didn't sign up for any of this. The man, who Emma now realized was wearing an earpiece, didn't flinch. You signed up the moment you involved her. She's the key. We've waited long enough. It's time to finish this. Emma's pulse thundered in her ears as the realization hit her like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't just about her adoption, her past, or even David's disappearance. This was a full-scale operation, years in the making, involving people she had known and trusted, people who were now being dragged into a web they had no way of escaping. She had never been safe. Not once. Everything had been planned, every step of the way, to draw her in, to bring her to this moment. She wasn't the victim of some random conspiracy. She was the centerpiece, the key to something so much bigger than herself. David shoved the man back, but it was clear that the situation was spiraling out of control. I won't let you hurt her, David growled, his voice filled with a raw intensity Emma had never heard before. His eyes were wild, frantic, as if he had already decided that if they were going to go down, they would go down fighting. But then, as if in slow motion, another figure appeared in the doorway, someone Emma hadn't expected to see. It was someone she had once trusted implicitly, someone who had always seemed like a friend. It was her mother, or at least, the woman she had always believed was her mother. The woman who had raised her, the one who had given her the life she thought was normal. But when she saw her face now, it wasn't the comforting, maternal expression Emma had known for years. It was something cold, calculating. Her mother didn't speak right away, but when she did, her words cut through the air like a blade. I never wanted it to come to this, but it was always meant to happen this way. I had no choice. Emma's entire body went rigid as she looked at her mother, the woman who had always been her anchor, her rock, the one person she believed she could rely on. You, she choked, her voice trembling with disbelief. You knew about all of this? You were involved. Her mother's gaze never wavered. I never had a choice, Emma. None of us did. You have to understand, we were part of something much bigger than any of us ever realized. And now, it's your turn to make a choice. This is your destiny, whether you like it or not. The words hit Emma with the force of a freight train. Everything she had ever believed, everything she had known, was shattering around her. Her mother wasn't a victim. She was part of the conspiracy. And now, Emma had to choose whether to fight, whether to push forward into the unknown and risk everything, or whether to turn away and live in the dark, pretending it wasn't happening. But as the men closed in, and as her mother stood there, her gaze unflinching, Emma knew one thing. There was no turning back. There was only one path left now, and it led into a world of chaos, danger, and truth that would break her heart, shatter her trust, and change everything she thought she knew about herself. The stakes had never been higher. The danger was real, and time was running out. The conspiracy wasn't just something in the shadows anymore. It was in her face, and it was coming for her. The air in the room was thick with the weight of the decisions Emma had to make. It felt like time itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to act. Her pulse thundered in her ears, her body tense as she stood in front of her mother, her real mother, not the woman she had known for most of her life, but the one who had been pulling the strings all along. Her eyes flicked to the men in suits, their cold, calculating stares never leaving her. They were waiting, but so was she. Emma wasn't sure what she was waiting for, but she knew it was time to face whatever came next. You never told me, did you? Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but the tension in the room amplified every word. You lied to me all these years. About who I am. About who you are. Her mother's face remained impassive, unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, regret, maybe, in her eyes that Emma couldn't quite place. I did what I had to, Emma, she said, her voice barely above a murmur. I didn't have a choice. They would have killed us both if I hadn't done what they said. Emma felt a wave of confusion wash over her. She had never imagined that the woman who had raised her, the woman who had comforted her during her worst moments, could be a part of this massive, dangerous conspiracy. It didn't make sense. But the more she looked at her mother, the more she realized that none of this had ever made sense. None of it. You were never supposed to find out, her mother continued, her voice tinged with sadness. They thought you were the one person who would never question what they told you, what they fed you. But they underestimated you, Emma. You always were too smart for them. The words sent a shiver down Emma's spine, but she couldn't process them yet. Everything was coming at her too fast. What do you mean, find out? Find out what? Her heart pounded, the gravity of the situation suffocating her. The pieces were there, swirling in her mind like a chaotic puzzle, but she couldn't get them to fit. Not yet. Her mother stepped closer, her expression now hardening with a sharp edge. You were never meant to be a part of this world. You were supposed to stay hidden, safe. But your father, he left too much behind. And now, it's all coming back to haunt us. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, but her eyes never left Emma's. I tried to protect you, but I can't stop it. Not anymore. Suddenly it clicked. Emma's head spun as she pieced together the fragments of her past, the truth finally revealing itself in a torrent of memories that hit her like a tidal wave. Her father. Her real father. The man who had disappeared when she was a child. The one whose death had always felt strange, too sudden. He hadn't been a victim. He had been a part of this. The conspiracy. He was the one who had left a trail, and she had followed it unknowingly into the heart of a darkness she could never escape. She took a step back, her legs suddenly weak beneath her. My father, she whispered, her voice shaking with the weight of the realization. He was a part of this all along? Her mother's face twisted with something that almost looked like pain. He was a part of something bigger than either of us, Emma. You're the key to everything. Everything we've been hiding, everything we've been trying to bury. And now they're going to use you. You can't run from it anymore. The words hung in the air like a noose around her neck. Emma wanted to scream, to run, to get away from all of this madness. But she knew, deep down, there was nowhere to go. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. Before she could speak again, the man who had been standing silently in the corner of the room, one of the men in suits, stepped forward. He had been watching her every move, studying her like she was some kind of experiment. His eyes gleamed with cold indifference, and Emma felt a chill run down her spine. You don't get it, do you? He said, his voice a low, menacing drawl. It's already too late. You've already made your choice the moment you started looking for answers. And now we're going to make sure the truth is buried. Forever. Emma's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What are you going to do? The man smirked, almost amused by her confusion. We've already erased everything. Your past, your father's involvement. Everything you thought was real is nothing but a lie. We control this. You think you've been running towards the truth?
No.
You've been walking into our trap, one step at a time. And now we finish this. Just then, the door burst open again, and in rushed someone Emma had never expected to see. It was David, but he was different now. His face was pale, eyes wild with panic. Emma, get out of here now, he shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Before Emma could react, a blinding pain shot through her head, and the world spun out of control. Everything went black. When Emma regained consciousness, she was no longer in the apartment. The room was cold, sterile, and unfamiliar. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic, and the walls were lined with steel doors. She could barely move her limbs, but her mind raced, trying to piece together what had just happened. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized something that made her blood run cold. She wasn't alone. Someone was standing in the shadows, watching her. Emma's pulse quickened as she looked up, locking eyes with the figure. And then she saw it. A photograph. A faded, old photograph. The image was unmistakable. Her mother, younger, standing beside a man she knew all too well. Her father. But there was something else, something that made her blood run cold. The man beside her father wasn't just anyone. He was the same man who had been orchestrating everything from the shadows, the one who had been behind it all. It was then that Emma understood. The conspiracy wasn't just about her. It was about control. And the last piece of the puzzle had just been dropped into place. The truth was more horrifying than she could have imagined, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever known. In that moment, Emma realized that no one was safe, not even the ones she loved. The battle for the truth had only just begun, and she was at the heart of it all. The door slammed shut behind her, and Emma's heart raced. There was no turning back now. She had to survive. She had to uncover the truth before it was too late. But the darkness that surrounded her seemed to grow with every step. After what felt like an eternity in the darkness, Emma finally emerged from the depths of the twisted web that had ensnared her life. Her father's name, once a whisper in her mind, was now a thunderous truth, echoing through every corner of her existence. It had taken everything she had, every ounce of strength, every shred of sanity, but she had uncovered the truth. She had stared into the abyss and walked away. Or so she thought. But nothing had prepared her for what came next. The final confrontation with her mother had shaken her to the core. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, they were all part of a much larger scheme, one that reached further than Emma could ever have imagined. Her mother, despite everything, had been a pawn in the game, her actions driven by fear. But Emma wasn't sure whether she could ever forgive her, or whether that even mattered. Because the real revelation wasn't about forgiveness, it was about survival, about reclaiming the life that had been stolen from her before she was even born. As Emma stood in front of the wreckage of her past, she realized something critical. No one, not even the people who had raised her, could be trusted. The game had changed. The stakes were higher now, and the truth, no matter how painful, had to be confronted. There were no more half-truths, no more illusions. She had spent so long chasing answers, only to discover that the truth was more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She had to live with that knowledge, and there was no escaping it. But as the dust settled, Emma found a strange sense of peace, though it wasn't the kind of peace she had expected. It wasn't the resolution she had hoped for. The final pieces of the puzzle had clicked into place, but the aftermath wasn't the neatly wrapped-up conclusion she had imagined. The world wasn't going to let her go easily, not when she had uncovered so much, not when the conspiracy had spread its roots so deep. Emma knew she couldn't just walk away, not without consequences. She had one final choice to make: to disappear, to cut ties with everything and everyone she had ever known, to live a quiet, hidden life away from the chaos, or to continue the fight, to bring down the dark forces that had been controlling her world for so long. She wasn't sure which path she would choose, and maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to decide right now. She would have time to think, to breathe, to process the weight of everything she had just learned. As she walked away from the place where everything had started, the place where her entire world had been turned upside down, Emma's thoughts were scattered, lost in the whirlwind of emotions that had taken hold of her. She looked back one last time, her gaze lingering on the shadows of the past that still clung to her every step. And yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt something stirring deep inside her. It was a flicker of hope, a promise that, no matter how dark the world had become, she would never stop fighting for the truth. But then, just as she was about to turn and disappear into the night, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message. The text was simple, yet it sent a chill down her spine. "We know you're still out there." Her fingers trembled as she stared at the screen. She wasn't free. Not yet. And maybe she never would be. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The questions, the mysteries, the secrets, they still lingered, like ghosts in the corners of her mind, reminding her that there was always more to uncover. And in that moment, Emma knew that the journey wasn't over. The past may have been revealed, but the future was still uncertain. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had been caught in the web of lies. And she wouldn't stop until the truth was out for good. As Emma disappeared into the darkness, her heart racing with adrenaline, one thing was clear: the fight for freedom, for answers, would never truly end. The truth was powerful, and it was still out there, waiting to be exposed. And for Emma, the journey was only just beginning.